First, I want to thank you all, my viewers, my subscribers, for all the kind regards and well wishes concerning my injury from back the 9th of May, believe it or not. I finally broke down because I wasn't getting any better. I finally broke down, went to the doctor, and he told me to keep this one on, and he put me in an actual splint on my right hand. Bad sprain. X-rays showed no fractures, which is good news, but it came with some bad news too, and that's absolutely no shop work of any kind for at least 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks we'll reevaluate. He said we'd really need an MRI to make sure that there wasn't any serious ligament damage, but he doesn't believe there is. Just a bad sprain, some tweaked ligaments and tendons, and this should do the trick. So I impatiently wait. That said, I hate to do it to you, I really do, but this is another re-edit. It's actually a re-edit of my first full YouTube project. I originally did it in 4 episodes. I'm going to pare it down, get rid of the music, and try to take it down into 1. So watch, enjoy. I made these especially for my daughter and son-in-law because of my twin grandsons. And you'll see more about that as the video continues. So thanks for watching. I truly appreciate it. I appreciate you sticking with me. I really do. I can't express enough. Especially harneomedia.com. Talk to them about any and all your website needs. Steve's a great guy, and he does a fantastic job at website creation and maintenance and administration. I can't thank him highly enough. Today we're going to take a little tour, kind of back to my pen turning days. I still turn a few pens now and then, not as many as I used to. I went to SWAT in August, and my friend Ken Nelson from Kallenshaan Woods hooked me up with some of these. These are his puzzle blanks. I don't know how well you can see that, but there you go. That might be a little better. But these are all laser cut and hollow. You put them together and glue the tubes in. I'll be showing you the turning process as we go. There's one difference in this one though, or this set. Aside from just being the jigsaw puzzle multicolored, if you replace the normal yellow number 3 with a black number 3 that Ken will send you, then you have an Autism Awareness pen. And the reason these are important to me is because I have twin autistic grandsons. So I'm making this pen and another for my daughter and her husband for Christmas. So stay tuned and we'll see what this turns out like. I've not turned one of these before. I did not film the process of putting them together, and let me tell you, they're a bit of a pain. And I'm going to fill in places that are a little bit loose. I've already started coating it with some black colored epoxy. So I'm going to continue to fill those voids in between the puzzle pieces, so it makes kind of an outline, and it'll look better than just filling those with CA. Let's get started. Almost forgot. In the description down below, like just down here, I'm going to put a link to Kallenshaan Woods so you can get to it easier. They have all kinds of laser cut kits that you can put together, some easier than others, but Ken does a great job. He's been doing this for a long time. 2007, I know for sure. I've already flushed the ends of the barrel on this Sierra. This is a Sierra I'm making. This particular puzzle pen kit only fits the Sierra length pens. Note, with these, because of all of these little pieces that are glued together, the last thing in the world you want to do is stick these in a traditional barrel trimmer. If you do, you're going to have chip out that looks something like that. Yeah, I did that. I can fix it, but still, you don't want that. So what I did after I did this, I glued a piece of sandpaper, 80 grit, to the back side of the barrel trimmer. Flipped the cutter over, tightened it back down, stuck it in my drill press, And then I sanded the top of this flat and smooth using the right size cutter in the barrel trimmer, and I got a nice flat cut. I don't have one of those fancy jigs that you put on your up against a sanding disc or one of your standing belt sanders. I don't have that. I don't want to spend the money on it. That's a single-use tool. I try not to have as many of those as I can. So sand it. Don't use the cutter. You might get by using the cutter by hand. I did a little bit of that and it seemed to work okay. Just takes longer. But you got to be careful when you hit that edge, because you're going to hit an edge between where these two pieces go together. Okay, now first I want to tell you that I quit turning on a mandrel. I quit turning pins on a mandrel back in 2007. I don't like using a mandrel. This was before the day of the mandrel saver. I think that may help because you're not putting pressure on that mandrel, causing it to bow and giving you non-concentric pins. I hated that. So I got to the point where even when I was turning on a mandrel before I went to between centers, I would turn one blank at a time, one barrel at a time. I wouldn't turn both. I wanted as little eccentricity in the ends of my tubes as I could get. So I started turning between centers. There's a couple of ways you can do this. One, special bushings to go in most pins. Here's a pointer for you, and something that I use. You know the Sierra bushings that you've already got? These little jewels right here? They're perfect. You don't have to do anything to them to put them on a dead center. Now, dead centers are cheap. I got this one, I believe, from Little Machine Shop years ago. It works great. I like using Little Machine Shop because they're inexpensive and because it's a machine shop. They know tolerances and they're not going to sell a cheap product. So I got it from Little Machine Shop, $4 or $5, inexpensive. If I wear it out or damage it or whatever, I throw it away, order a new one. Every pin bushing that has a shoulder like this, you can turn between centers. All you have to do is put the bushings in place, just like you normally do. And this time, instead of sliding them up over a mandrel, you put them between centers. Let me show you. Put it up on your dead center. Bring your tailstock up. Lock it in place. Advance your live center, and there you go. Now turn it like you would any other pin. Between centers, you're not going to get any wobble, you're not going to get any eccentricity. So let's turn this little jewel. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, or thinking. Billy, that's a mighty big skew for such a little blank. There's a story behind this skew, but I'll tell you later. I made myself learn to use a skew when I first started turning pins. I don't like gouges as a rule. I like my bowl gouges on bowls. I like a nice steep grind spindle gouge when I'm doing spindle work. Big spindle work. Let's look at this. Well, that didn't take long. I'm not quite down there. Let me move you over. I'm not quite down there yet, but I don't know if you can see the voids that are left in between some of the pieces. That's my little chip out from my barrel trimmer. I'll fix that with some, maybe an offcut. Anyway, these voids, what I'm gonna do now, before I get it any smaller, I'm gonna mix up some epoxy, and I'm gonna add a little black paint. It is automotive polyurethane. It works great. It doesn't affect the strength of the epoxy that I've found. So there's another little tip. Now some of this I've already filled, like right in here. I don't know if you can see that very well. But I filled this before I put it on the lathe. I tried to get it all filled, but I knew I'd miss a few spots. So I've got to go back in here and add a little black epoxy to this. But that's how you turn between centers. It is that easy. And we'll come back after I get this back on the lathe after I got some epoxy on it. Okay, I just remembered I got sidetracked when I started to tell you about the skew. Being a pretty big skew for a small pen. And it is, but it really isn't, because it does the job and it does it well. I had the fortune of meeting our modern skew master, Alan Lacer, at SWAT back in August, and was privileged to be able to sit in his seminar on how he grinds and sharpens the skew. And it made a believer in me. And so the first thing I did when I got home is begin to reshape this skew so that it looks like his grind. And I have to tell you, I mean, I'm not finished yet. I've just begun by flattening off the top. You still want to keep your point to point at 70 degrees with the top flat for about the first third, and then the sweep back, and then sharp and honing the skew between cuts when you need to with 600 grit diamond stone or diamond card. Excellent information. It's saved me a lot of time and it's made a huge difference. So that's why I use the big skew. Now, the camera died on me last night, so I didn't get to show you me taking this back down, but I will. Let me see if I can get in there. I did fill those blanks, I mean the void, what few voids there were in that blank with black epoxy, and smoothed it down. So it's all black in there now. And typically when I get through with a skew cut, I can start sanding at about 240. This is really smooth. It looks good. It's nice and smooth. So I'm going to start at 240, and then I'll put some lacquer sanding sealer on it and finish it up. I've got some Deft lacquer sanding sealer on here. Already looking good. I use Deft lacquer sanding sealer on almost all my wood pens because I finish my pens with lacquer. I hear your question, but Billy, why don't you use CA like everybody else? I used CA years ago, and it's a quick, easy finish. I'll give you that. No question. But there is a however. And that however is pretty important to me. One of the CA pens that I finished was for a customer. It was a cherry burl. Beautiful pen, absolutely gorgeous. CA shine, brilliant. 2-3 months after I gave him his pen, he came back to me and he said, "Billy, I think something's wrong." And I had 3, 4, 5 coats of CA on. Polished it out real nice, and the chemicals in his body acids or his body oils, something ate through that CA like it wasn't even there. Half of it was gone. What wasn't gone was dingy. The pen had turned gray, and cherry burl should be gray. So I took the pen apart, refinished it with lacquer in the method I'm going to show you here in a little while, and that was 12 years ago. Last time I heard from him was last year, and he said the pen's in great shape. He still uses it. Yes, lacquer can be a pain. It's actually easy sanding sealer. I sanded before the sanding sealer. I sanded this to 400. After the sanding sealer, before I put the lacquer on it, I'm going to micromesh it. Yes, micromesh is expensive. I bought this set 12 years ago. I bought 2 sets. The first one, I didn't know how to use micromesh correctly, and so I burnt through it in about 3-4 months. This set has lasted me since then. It still works, it still cuts great. When it gets dirty, I throw it in the washing machine in a net bag and then come back out and work it again. There's a couple of things you need to know about micromesh. If you're using it dry, always use the backer pad that they supply with it. Always. Another thing you have to remember about micromesh is you have to be quick. It doesn't take much. And if you overheat this, it will melt. And you can see where I've overheated it in a couple of spots right here. I was still learning to use it. But the rest of this sheet cuts just fine. So, let me show you the right way to use micromesh. Low speed. And keep it moving. Don't let it run in one spot. I mean, one spot on the micromesh. Keep it moving around the micromesh. And that backer pad helps protect it. You can see that it's cutting because it's turning its colors. It wipes out, it cleans up nice. And that's the 1500. Now I'll continue through all the grits up to 12,000 and get this pen done. Take a little leeway here and put in a commercial plug, not for anybody but me. If you wish to help support the Messy Studio in any way to help further us along, keep us in turning supplies, finishes, sandpaper, etc., you can do that in a number of ways. My PayPal Me donate button is in the description below. My Amazon affiliate link is in the description below. Anything you buy there, I get a percentage of. Doesn't cost you anymore, and it really, really helps us out. We get a few pennies, but every little bit helps. Thanks again. Let's see if we can knock this one out. Sorry, I'm trying not to get in the way. some sanding sealer. Put it on by hand, rub it in good, let it get a good soak. Turn the lathe down, turn it up, and buff it in, or rub it in, burn it in. That process will help dry it faster, create a little bit of heat in it. And it is dry. Dry enough. But we'll let it set a few minutes just to make sure, and then I'll hit it with the Micromesh. Okay, it's dry now. Time to Micromesh. Start with the coarsest grip. This on high. I tend to get better results. Remember to keep it moving. And I'll go through them all. That was a 3200 just to show you it was cut. Okay, you've heard me talk about my lacquer dipping technique. This is my setup. Bunch of pieces of 1/4 inch all thread, and I've turned, for this particular kind of pen, I think this is probably either a junior gent or a junior statesman. I turned these bushings, the steps fit inside the tubes. It helps keep lacquer out of the tube. The outside dimension is the finished dimension, same as the turning bushing for the pen. Now the reason that you want something on both sides of the pen blank is because when you're dipping into lacquer, that lacquer is going to run down to one end. What I'll do is I'll dip, 30 minutes later I come back and dip, turn it over. 30 minutes later I dip again, turn it over. 30 minutes later I dip again, turn it over. I put 4 coats on, all a half hour apart. Now, you can see down at the bottom of this bushing, you might can see, there's a little ridge of buildup. If you don't use bushings, that little ridge of buildup is going to accumulate at the bottom of each end of the pen blank. And then you got to sand it out and buff it out, and it's all just a big pain in the butt. So this way it all runs and flows smooth. You don't have to worry about that at the end. Here's another set that I turned for another pen. This is a single barrel. Now what I have to do, it's been a while since I've made a pen and dipped it in lacquer. I have to figure out, this is just an old set of bushings that wasn't any good, and I turned them backwards. It fits one particular pen fairly well. I think it may be a Sierra. We're going to find out. I got to check and get the right size bushings on here. And you don't have to tighten these down real tight either. But because I'm using all thread, because I've got various lengths of pen blanks or pen tubes, it can get a little long-winded. This looks like an old set of Sierra bushings. I went over to the wire wheel on my 6-inch high-speed grinder and knocked the lacquer off the inside where they go into the tube. Put these in. You don't have to get these really tight. Just finger tight's good enough, because you're going to have to break them loose later. Just finger tight enough to keep the lacquer from running inside the tube. Put it in its stand, get the next blank. Now there's nothing going inside of these on this end to keep it tight, but it'll be okay. Okay, got it snug, trued up on both sides. This one is snug in between the bushings. The lacquer is just going to run right off of it, because it's going to continue to run. You can see that buildup all the way down here. Get enough depth into my hole to make this stand straight. If it doesn't stand straight, then all that lacquer will run to one side. You want a smooth, even coat all the way around. And dipping gives me just exactly that, if I keep the pen straight. If you let it lean too much, like that, then everything's going to lean to one side. You want it as straight as possible. I've already stirred my lacquer. This is just deft. Dip it in just above the top bushing. Pull it up. Let it drain. Clean as much of the excess off as you can. Stick it in the hole. Now it's standing straight. Take the next one. We're going to dip it just. Take the next one. We're going to dip it just above the bushing. Bring it back out. Put it in the jig. Make sure it's standing straight. Put the lid back on the can. Set the timer for 30 minutes. Come back, turn them over, dip them, and do that 4 times total. Okay, it's been 30 minutes. Time to flip and put the second coat on. Pick it up. Turn it over. Take it to the bushing. Let it drain off. Stand it straight. Take the second one, dip it to the bushing. And we do that 2 more times. Okay, time for coat number 3. Another 30 minutes, I'll come back and do the final coat. Okay, last coat. Make sure they're standing straight one last time and let these set for a few hours. And then I'll make sure the lacquer separates from the bushings cleanly. After that, I'll let them sit 7 to 10 days to fully cure, and then we'll buff them out. Alrighty then. After you've let these sit and dry for about 2 hours, it's a good idea to twist this bushings away from the barrel. Give yourself a little space between them. You can see that's looking pretty good. What that will do, if you let it cure for the full, depending on your environment, the humidity levels, etc. So depending on how long you let it cure, in my case 7 to 10 days, if you just let it sit compressed between the between the spacers or the bushings for that full time, that lacquer is going to be rock hard. You can get them apart, but you have to be real careful, and it takes I use an X-Acto blade just to scribe a line. Otherwise, if you try to just twist them apart, you can actually shear the lacquer off of the pin tube side. Don't ask me how I know this. So, get them separated, and then put them back in the stand to dry. It'll be real easy to clean up those edges, and it'll happen actually naturally when we buff it out. And set it aside somewhere out of the way where it's not going to get hurt. And then in a few days, we'll finish them. It's now been a little over a week, so let's put those Autism Puzzle Pens together and see what they look like. I'm going to show you my process for doing the press. A lot of people use dedicated pen press for this. I made these little blocks out of oak and corian, and they fit on my lathe, and I use my lathe as a press. And I do that because I find I get more control, and it's something that's handy, and I've already got it. So I had scrap corian, I had scrap oak, I cut them to fit, and I'll show you how I do that. This one is drilled to fit on the headstock spindle. This one is drilled for the tailstock. Take the first one up, line it up the way I want the clip to be. That's upside down. I want the clip like so. It's not really covering the black there. Lock the tailstock down. Once you get a little bit of pressure on it, line everything up and make sure it goes straight, and then just like that, Bob's your uncle. Pin is together. We'll finish putting it together after I press the other one. Thing about the Sierra, you really only have to press one part in. Alright, look to see where I want this, how I want it lined up. I think I'm going to do this one in about the same position I did the other one. A little bit of pressure. You don't want to use too much. You want to take it nice and slow as best you can, because you don't want to deform anything. And just like that, we're good to go. Now we'll go over to the bench and we'll put them together. Okay, we're over here at the bench. Yeah, it's messy. This is the messy studio. So, got the spring on the refill. Put the refill in the bottom part of the pen. Screw the transmission into place. Make sure it's nice and secure and squared. Grab the body of the pen. Slide it on. Just like that. As you can tell, mechanism works fine. Finished pen. Now we'll take the other one and do the same thing. Put the refill in. Screw the transmission in place. I'm not too sure about some of the newer Sierra type pens, but with the older ones, and these are 10, 11 years old, when you screw these in, sometimes they didn't want to square up, or you might not get them fully seated, and they would feel kind of loose. One of the things that I would do to help that, if that was the case, was take a rubber band and wrap it around this section of the transmission several times, and then that would give me a better purchase to be able to tighten this up. As it is, it's just fine. Once you got it together, put the body on. It twists just fine. So there we have it. 2 finished Autism Awareness Sierra puzzle pens. You can see the black over here on this side, just by this clip. That black piece makes it Autism Awareness. I hope the kids like them. I'm sure they will. Now all that's left for me to do is send these off to my laser engraver and have their names put on them so they don't grow legs and walk off their desks. And they're ready to deliver for Christmas. So thanks again for watching this re-edit, folks. I truly appreciate it. I really, really do. Please like, if you're so inclined, subscribe, and share. I mean, that really helps us out a lot. I mean, really helps us out a lot. Thanks again. I'll come back live to doing updated projects as quickly as I can. You know, we got to wait on this. Y'all come back.